There's two things in life. There's a problem to solve and a tension to manage. So we can either 1, avoid the problem, 2, solve the problem, or 3, manage the tension. Those are our 3 choices. So if you're stuck in living a default life, you're gonna have to live with the consequences of that default life or live with the consequences of living a life on purpose.
Hi, I'm Art Calderon. Welcome to ReedFlections, a podcast on life, leadership, and learning. I'm here with Reed Nyffeler. Reed is a father and a husband and a CEO of a growing global franchise company. Reed is going to share a lot of his thoughts and a lot of his experiences with us on how to grow in your life and how to create something that's purposeful instead of just haphazards. Now, we are pretty far into this, Reed. Fortunately, we got a lot more to go, so I still have a job. But episodes 1 through 4, we talked about priorities, right? Then we got into habits, turning those priorities into habits. And then episodes 10 through 13, know your purpose. That was a impactful group of podcasts there. Now we're talking about your journey, right? How to begin your journey of living your life on purpose, and the how-tos. Sort of getting in the weeds a little bit about that. Episodes 14 through 17 was a long-term vision, 5-year milestones, annual checkpoint, and quarterly calibration. And now we're finally getting into something even more granular, monthly measurements. Now, tell us about monthly measurements. Why is that important, and how does that work in making progress on your purpose?
Yeah, so if you were here last episode, we talked about that. Yes, you were, Art. Yes, I noticed. We talked about that quarterly calibration. We're calibrating towards our goal. We use the word measurement here, and that's super critical. And as I look way back and I study history, there's key tools that progressed society, and it came down to measurement. So they used to measure horses by its hand, right? That's right. How many hands tall is this horse, as an example?
They didn't have any hands, the horses.
No, but the humans did.
The people's hands.
The people's hands.
Right.
Well, I would say average size hands. But if you have huge hands or small hands, that measurement is all that different, right? And a cubit used to be the difference between your elbow and your wrist, I believe, or if not, it's your forearm, essentially. And so again, different lengths with different people.
Right. And it didn't have to be, at the time, it didn't have to be that precise. But then as they got a little bit in history, and further along in history, they realized we need to get a little more precise.
The less precise, the less progress. And that's what I'm getting towards.
Okay.
However, one thing I've traveled to 50 plus countries across the globe. There's one measurement, and it's not metric or standard, that is everywhere, and that's monthly. They may have different time zones.
Okay.
They have the sun goes up and down at different times. But one thing we know, even though there's a daily calendar, the times are different, they have the same month, right? That the months are the same for the entire world. I've yet to find a culture that lives on a different month.
How about a lunar calendar? Is that still the same?
Well, we all have the same 12 months of the year and at the same 365 days. And so that is where this takes that tangible piece to a measurement that is consistent. So the critical part here is that you have a consistent measurement tool to see if you have progress. Now, we were talking about in the previous episodes, the 4 stages of a season. The months should be the same. And so typically a month has 4 weeks. And so when I break that down, I want to have those 4 weeks that are helping me make progress, because 1 week we may be traveling, right? But at the same time is if we look at those, 30 days, or in some cases 28, or as many as 31 days, and more importantly, how is that time broken down? We look at the number of hours in that week, and we want to schedule our priorities. Now, in that case, we have 24 hours in the day, right? And there's 30 days. And so how many of those hours am I scheduling to my priority of my faith in my case? And that's the first priority. So for me, that's on Sundays. Every month, every week, that is on a Sunday. And whether I'm committing to my faith on a Sunday as a balance of time, and certainly throughout the day and week, but that's a set aside, prioritized time that is on a regular cadence that I measure my activity associated with my faith. The second is my family. And so I've often said this for a long time. I work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. so I can be available from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m., right? And so I go to my 5 to 8 after I'm done with my 8 to 5. And so as I calibrate that, and then it's also the weekends, regardless of what my travel schedule is, probably 80 to 95% of the weekends, I'm either with family or home on the weekends.
Okay.
And so I'll arrive back on a Friday and leave on a Monday morning,
So
and that works for me.
You don't travel on the weekend for work?
Unless I have my family with me, and in rare occasions,
Okay.
probably less than 10% of the time for sure. And so that's the family. Then the third priority is work. And so that is allocating the Monday through Friday, right? And so then I have 4 work weeks I schedule in a work cadence around that. And so then I'm saying, okay, what is my goal? This is a monthly measurement, and the most tangible and practical and applicable for many is going to be that productivity one. And so then I say, okay, what are those 4 weeks? And I break them down into 4 different weeks. And so in our case, at the organization I lead now, the first week of the month, we have a training week. So I'm always trying to be here the first week of the month, every single month throughout the entire year. And that is the first week. I schedule all my one-on-ones with my team around that priority. I have training weeks where people are coming in that week, and I build my calendar a year in advance. Every first week of the month is there. The second week of the month, I try to use as a travel week. Much of the demands of my role and responsibility require me to be in front of our franchisees, our clients, or otherwise. And I try largely to divide it for that second week. So then as I'm planning my calendar, I know it's that second week. The third week, I try not to be gone 2 straight weeks. I come back in the office and I'm filling in the gaps around my initiatives. So the first week, consider that kind of a check-in, a balance, a consistency. The second week is kind of a travel to support and engage the organization. The third week is work on my initiatives, right? So I take that quarterly calibration and I'm really focusing that third week on, okay, is it the season of no? What do I need to know and understand? Or is it the season of sow? What do I need to sow that third week? Or is it the season of grow? And how do I foster and consistently grow? Or
And
the show?
different initiatives can be in different seasons for you. Is that right?
So that third week is the most interchangeable,
Okay.
right? That third week is the most interchangeable based on the initiatives I'm working in. And then that fourth week is flexible, right? So the first week is, consider that kind of a check-in and maintenance week, right? To say it another way. The second week is to go and travel and invest in understanding. The third week is initiative. The fourth week is flexible. And so that fourth week, it may be travel, it may be work on the initiative, it may be check-in, or it may be, and the occasional fifth week of the year would likely be that same flexible one. So because we have to have flexibility in our schedule, because if it's too structured, if it's too consistent every month, we really won't be able to adjust when things happen, right? And I try to schedule around that flexible. So that could be a vacation, right? It could be spending more time on a particular initiative that's taking more time, or it could be adding travel to go see other people if there's a relationship I need to continue to invest in, right? And so that's how I schedule that monthly, and that's the measurement. And so then at the end of each month, I have those same 4 weeks, and I see what happened the previous 4 weeks in the other month, and then am I making progress on my quarterly calibration?
So you talked a little bit about measuring in order to make your changes or on your focus. And we've talked before how you have to have something that's measurable in order for it to be a real achievable goal, right? A SMART goal. What do you measure? It's it's not necessarily 1 and 1 or 10 and 10. It's a little more. It's not quite that tangible. So what are some of the things you measure in order to do this?
Yeah, and so if we look at any form of measurement, and I'll go back to the analogy with the horses, the number of hands is measuring that horse compared to another horse. And so that's what a month is compared to the previous month. So saying, am I measuring progress towards my purpose? That's essentially what I'm trying to measure. And the month is enough of a time to measure that, right? If we just look at a moment, we're like, did I have an effect? But if we look at anything in our life, and whether you're trying to go on a diet, you're trying to, exercise, a month is a pretty good timeline, right? You can see progress over a 4-week cycle or a 30-day cycle of time pretty progressively, right? Let's give a very tangible measurement metric. If you're trying to save money, right? You usually have a monthly budget. And you can see the beginning of the month, if you're paid on a monthly basis, what you had versus the previous month, right? And so that's something I do in our office here. We have a monthly budget. And so I always pick a particular date and time, and the close of the month is a good one because it gives you generally an appropriate amount of period of time that you can reflect the previous year. So then I say, okay, financially or organizationally, where were we at a year ago in that same month, the particular month we choose, and where were we at compared to last month? So it's year over year, month over month, right? And so we're measuring our progress to our purpose. Now, in a business sense, that's a budget and initiatives, right? Because I craft those initiatives, as I talked about a couple of podcasts ago, in the yearly stage. And am I making progress, right? So how do we do that in a personal sense, right? And many times that's a report card, and then we look at the monthly. So if you're a student and you're going to school or can identify as having students, you'd say, okay, I get a quarterly report card. That's what happened when I was in school. You got a quarterly report card. But each and every month, the teacher would say, hey, here's what this quarter is looking like, right? I mean, you're missing this, or turn this assignment, whatever the case might be, or pay a little more attention. And for example, I remember specifically, I was meeting with a Spanish teacher in college, and she goes, Reed, I think that you're underperforming. I said, thank you for noticing, because I agreed with her. And I said, so that we can agree upon that. But it was a measurement that I thought was appropriate.
Yeah.
Right. Because I agreed with her on the progress of the measurement, and I agreed with the grade. And I asked for one that I was specifically targeting, which was the C in that case. But at that state, that was where she said it was in progress. She said, hey, I think you have more potential. And I said, thank you for noticing that as well, but I don't want to apply it here. And we got in a little discussion in English, fortunately, because I understood it in that case, not in Spanish. But ultimately, I think why? Because I understood in college that, one, I wasn't going to be all that good at Spanish. Number two is I was going to disproportionately apply my time in that area that wasn't necessarily going to be something that was a high return for me. That's why measurement's important. We can spend all our time on a low priority because our desire for perfection compensates for our focus on our priorities. And that's a critical thing to understand. We want to be perceived as perfect. That teacher was saying, you can be an A student.
Imagine this, an A in Spanish, right? She was trying to lay the vision out before you.
Because that was important to her.
Yeah.
Right? That I, as a student, was going to get a C or an A. But hey, that's not important to me. So this measurement, you will have demands on your month that will lead to a default life. Now, I could have been pressured by that teacher to default to getting an A because I possibly could have. I could have studied 20 hours a week or whatever time it would have been. I could go and immerse myself in the Spanish speaking culture.
Yeah.
And
you could have called me, Reed.
I could have called Art to take my test for me.
Yo puedo hablar español.
Yeah.
But I didn't get
Muy
that
bien.
call. It wasn't important to you.
No.
Okay.
So that was the key, right? So that measurement saying she's measuring against her standard, but I need to measure against the standard of what my priorities are. And we can get trapped in that month, right? The calendar can consistently flip and we're living that default life. If we don't fill our calendar, something else will, right? And it could be recreation, right? I didn't mention that in my priorities because that is going to fill the space that's there. That's the natural thing we're going to fill our space. So we don't need to plan for that. The available time is applied to that. Right? That's why I didn't mention it when I was planning my calendar because I will have recreation time in my schedule, and that is the 4th. But most people default to recreation.
It's easier, right?
It's easier.
Yeah.
It doesn't require anything of us.
Yeah, and it's enjoyable. Right? It's not conflict. It's fun, right?
But we can all agree that recreation doesn't lead to progress. Right? And ultimately, if we are looking at the hamster wheel of each month and we're saying, why am I not making progress? I'm in the same state of everything else. We need to first look at that 4th priority, in my case, recreation, and saying, I'm spending too much time on recreation. I'm not making progress because the things I'm spending my time on are highly recreation. And I go back and I look at my calendar. And if you look at your calendar, one of the things that even since the day we got married, my wife loves, and it's a Christmas present, is a calendar, a physical calendar.
Oh, old school. Okay.
She's old school, right? Even though there's digital calendars, an invite is written on the calendar, right? It's not, I'm going to send you an Outlook invite.
And is it different colors too? The different
nope,
color pens?
It's the most available pen. So whatever that might be. And so then she writes an invite. And actually, I always look at her calendar just maybe for entertainment to make sure maybe we'll see if I fit on her calendar. I don't know. I mean, maybe we'll see where that priority is. But then afterwards, it's say lunch with Reed after we had the lunch. So she's going back.
Oh, she puts it on there
after the fact because she saves them, right? So they're all in a pile. So all the years they're saved, and she goes back in case and say, hey, what did I do back in that calendar? That's her time hop. And you go back and you look at that calendar and you say, okay, and then she can see progress. And every time, one of the things she's enjoying is that as she gets on her social media apps, they give her messages from before. And so she'll see things that were 7 years ago, and then she'll evaluate progress. And she's a stay-at-home mom and does a great job, but she can see the progress of her children, right? She can see the progress of their education, the progress of their growth, the progress of their love for one another, the experiences that we otherwise had, and that's progress, right? And she knows, and as we look back at their graduations, as their notable times in life, all the progress that was made, well, that was measured in the months, right? There's months of school, there was months of summer, there was months of holidays, and all that is measured in those months, right? And we may not pick that particular day, apart from maybe a birthday or a particular holiday, but we could remember typically the month it happened, because that's an appropriate measurement tool. We'll remember that happened in March of, whatever period of time. That happened in January or whatever the case might be, even though that particular day, whether it was a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, didn't really matter. It's that month that typically happened, and we can see that season and that month. That's why a month is an appropriate measurement tool to show progress.
All right. Now, you talked a little bit what you call default life, right? There's some things that are necessary, and they're gonna take our time from us. I know that every month there are some bills that got to be paid.
That's right.
Regardless of how my life is going, these things have to be taken care of. And you talked about the teacher who wanted you to try harder and put more time and energy and resources into getting an A instead of a C. But you stuck to your guns there. You said, no, I have a finite amount of time and energy and resources, and I don't want to put any more than is necessary into this class. So how do the rest of us prevent from getting sucked into that default life, and all of a sudden it's the 30th and you went through the whole month and you haven't made any changes? How do you
Right.
how do you prevent that?
So these episodes are broken down of a book that is a life on purpose. And you have a life on purpose or you have a default life. I
That's the
believe
title.
that's the title of the book, Life on
Purpose.
Purpose.
Be looking for it.
That's right. And so this is giving you the framework of that, because I believe if you do not have a life on purpose, you're living a default life. So a default life means that whatever the decision is in the circumstances and emotion, I'll make the decision. That's default. If you are making decisions based on your emotions in the moment or the circumstances presented to you, you're living the default life. Back to my teacher. She's providing me a circumstance and provoking emotion. At the time, she was challenging my ego.
Oh, you sure
And the
was, huh?
circumstances were I was sitting in her class and she had the authority to give me
Uh-huh.
any grade that she determined was appropriate. And so I could have defaulted to the circumstances sitting in her class and the emotion she was provoked. But in that case, I was living a life on purpose. And that purpose did not include an A in Spanish class. Right. And I know my wife's going to hate this episode because I've got students and she's going to, don't tell her kids to go get a C.
Yeah,
And don't tell them to say
Or
C,
your
C, read
daughter,
to-
right?
or-
Hopefully
yes,
they're not
or-
watching this.
Yes, exactly.
You should try for that A, kids.
And so the answer that I provided went towards my purpose. So
Mhm.
in that situation where you could fall to circumstances and emotions, we don't want to sell someone. No, we're people pleasers,
Yeah.
right? So if you're a default person, you're largely going to default because you're a people pleaser to pleasing that person and focusing on an A. But what I gave her back, and it didn't necessarily create salve to her to solve that problem, was that I said, here's what my purpose is. I said, my intent is to go and develop as a leader so that I can go and change lives. And I believe I will learn the appropriate language necessary to do that, but my time should be allocated to be developing as a leader at that time. I had already committed to leaders. In fact, I had already at that time read a book that had it's Stephen Covey's seven habits of highly effective people.
Mhm.
And I had understood that. And I said, this is what I'm created for. This is the beginning, the impetus of my purpose. I was making a decision to not to default what other circumstances and emotion were there, but to choose to live my purpose, regardless when confronted. And I believe in college at that time was the beginning of me saying, I have the choice, regardless of what authority is around me, to decide to live a life on purpose.
Now, would you say because you had done all that foundational work even before you were in her class, it gave you the courage to deliver that message and not fall back into the default life when she was trying to pull you into that?
We go to default life when we don't have clarity and commitment to our purpose. So the first thing we need to do is going back, and this is episodes ago, what is your purpose? I had clarity of my purpose and I had made commitment to it. You will default when you don't have clarity and commitment because you don't know what else to do, right? I mean, there was a line in the Alice in Wonderland movie where the Cheshire Cat is there advising Alice. And Alice says, I don't know which way I should go, left or right. And he said, well, where do you end up? She goes, well, I don't know. He said, it doesn't matter which way you pick. To me, that's analogous to a default life. You haven't decided where you want to go, so you live in the circumstances and emotion. So I'm telling you, to live a life on purpose, you need to have clarity around your purpose and commitment to it all. If you have clarity and commitment, it makes all your other decisions easy. Because then I'm just communicating my purpose to you. I never have since talked to my Spanish teacher, right? We can get so hyper-focused on these roles of authority within our lives at that time that we will never communicate again with and make a definitive decision around our future because someone in that moment is trying to assert their authority upon us. And we are under their authority. I was under the teacher's authority. She could give me the grade that she wanted to give me. But I also knew that I was there. And this is also important. We will be governed by our greatest fear. I say this often. And you live a default life because of the fear that you are governed by. So I could have been afraid of failing that class.
Mhm.
I could have been afraid of not living up to the standard that teacher was giving me. So back to my priorities. I study the Bible thoroughly. And I study what God tells us to fear. And Art, I know you've studied that. What is the only thing God tells us to fear?
Him.
That's right. So I decided I wasn't going to be afraid of this teacher. I wasn't going to be afraid.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to be afraid of who I was created to be. right? I wasn't going to be afraid to live my purpose, because so many people, after they've crafted that purpose statement and then they get challenged in the default life mentality is, am I afraid to live out my purpose? Some of them are sticking in that thing. They've crafted their purpose statement. They know what they need to do. They go into that so phase of the quarterly calibration. They default to the life in the monthly measurement because they're afraid to live their purpose. And the first step of doing that's challenging, right? I'm sitting there in front of a teacher who's taught for years, and I'm saying as a college student, sophomore, junior in college, and I'm confronting her. I could have easily willowed or wilted in that moment.
Yeah.
But that was, I believe, a beginning of me saying, I know whose I am and what I was created to do, and I'm not going to be afraid of a teacher.
I doubt she had very many other students who would give at least a reason.
That's right.
Most of them are just like, oh, well, I'm just not, I don't want to do the work, or it's too
Right.
hard. I got other things. But you actually said, well, this is just not haphazard. This is a purpose.
And this is
right?
how that conversation went, to your point, because she was fully expecting that. It's like, yes, teacher, I'll go study.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do my best, and not do your best.
Yeah.
I said, hey, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to give my best. Right. And she's like, well, I appreciate that, because most people say they're going to give their best and they
How
don't.
refreshing.
And so then she's like, you're telling me you're not going to give your best. Most of them say, I'll try harder, right, to that point, but they're not authentic.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to be my authentic self with you. The majority of the people don't get an answer that's authentic or honest. So in that case, understand your purpose with clarity and then be committed. She appreciated my clarity of what I was trying to achieve and my commitment, even if it didn't align with her. And we're going to see as time evolves that we may have to kind of separate from certain relationships.
Sure.
Or endure, right?
Yeah.
Because there's two things in life. There's a problem to solve and a tension to manage, right? So we can either, one, avoid the problem, two, solve the problem, or three, manage the tension. Those are our three choices. And many times in a default life, we're avoiding the problem, right? Or we're managing a problem as a tension when it's really a tension, or we're trying to solve a tension we can't solve. So let's break those three down. The obvious one is avoiding the problem. That's saying, not my problem. You know, my parents joked because even though I have three siblings, they thought there was a fifth, because the fifth was named not me. And they don't remember this kid being born.
Yeah.
And they don't remember his birth weight or her birth weight or height. And they don't even remember the birthday, but they started appearing when we could talk.
From that kid,
Yeah, that was definitely the youngest, because it started appearing when we could start talking.
Yeah.
Because he said, who did this? Not me. And my dad was constantly looking for this not me. They didn't really have to have a bedroom for him or a bathroom.
Yeah.
They didn't really eat much. But I tell you right now, not me did a lot of things that they didn't appreciate. That's for sure. And that's the first thing, is I was avoiding the problem, right? What were we doing? We were causing some mischief. I know that you'll be completely surprised that I was mischievous as a child in some way. And at the same time is that not me. So what happened was taking responsibility, right? We transitioned that. That's the first one. I'm avoiding the problem. So then it's a second thing. And then the next one's the problem to solve. So in that moment with that teacher, I had the decision to solve the problem. Instead, I realized there's a tension to manage.
Right.
So no matter how that conversation went, the next week I had to be in her class. Right. So here's a teacher that challenged me to fail. And so I decided to make this a tension I had to manage. And I did that by telling her the purpose why I'm managing it as a tension and not a problem that's solving. She wanted me to solve a problem, which is get an A instead of a C.
Yeah.
And I was going to manage the tension. Say, I'm going to get through your class and it's going to be passing, so I don't have to take it again. That's for both of our benefit.
She could either respect that or not.
That's right.
But that's still what you were going to do.
That's what I was going to do. Right. And I was willing and able. And this is the other reason why in a monthly measurement that we struggle is I was going to live with the consequences. Many times we are not willing and able to live with the consequences of our decision. I knew when I was talking to that teacher that I could fail that class. She had the power to be able to do that. She was in a position of authority, but I agreed that I would live with the consequences of that decision. I would retake with another teacher or hopefully see if I could get another extracurricular credit to graduate or whatever the case might be. But we have to decide that in order to not live with a default life, we are willing and able with clarity and commitment to live our life on purpose and do so and live with the consequences. That consequence in that moment was I could have failed the class. I would have disappointed the teacher and or otherwise had to take another class. And I was willing to live with the consequences. So if you're stuck in living a default life, you're going to have to live with the consequences of that default life or live with the consequences of living a life on purpose. I'd rather live with the consequences of living a life on purpose.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Reed. Once again, we're at the end of our time. Living a life on purpose with monthly measurements, monthly check-ins. Make sure to avoid the default life. Thank you very much for listening. All of you out there, all of our fans, our legions of fans, we appreciate your time. Next time, weekly. Wow, we're really getting into it now. Next time, we're going to talk about weekly. In the meantime, my name is Art Calderon. Be purposeful.
If you are out there and you are living month by month a default life, find a measurement. How do you want to measure your life monthly? And then make sure that measurement's associated with your priorities. And how do you make progress? You commit with clarity toward your purpose, then live with the consequences of choosing that. You're probably living a default life out there right now, and you're dealing with the consequences of that default life. It may have all sorts of ramifications in different areas at work, in their family environments, even in your faith or your recreation. Choose today to live your life on purpose. Commit to that purpose, have clarity around that purpose, and then communicate that purpose and ultimately live with the consequences. I can tell you the consequences of living your life on purpose are much better than living on the consequences of a default life. I challenge you to live a life on purpose and live within those consequences.